Welcome to another episode of Live from the Wish House with me, Chris Spinner. If you're a regular, welcome back. And if it's your first time, I'm so happy you're joining us. My path profoundly changed when my son was diagnosed with autism. My marriage collapsed and I had to develop my own Cris-losophies to navigate and thrive. I'm here to connect with you to share and learn, and together we can create the life you love to live. Please subscribe, like, share, and most importantly, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and stories. Today, I'm going to begin with one of my favorite quotes, which is the following. The windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror because where we are going is far more important than where we have been. Have you ever heard that before? It's one of my faves indeed, and today we're breaking it down. We're going to talk about how that thought applies to us in our daily living and how we might be able to shake off some of those rearview mirror thoughts, which will keep us grounded in the present and ultimately make us happier. Today, I'm going to do my best to break you free from rearview mirror mentality, and it's all going to take place right here at the Wish House. So let's talk about what this quote means. Let's begin with the rearview mirror. Now, there's a reason for the rearview mirror. We need to know what's behind us. We need to know from whence we've come. We need to take a piece of that along with us in our drive. Sometimes it's helpful for us to be able to think about the things we've done on our journey, things that we're happy we've used in our lives, and things we wish we could have done differently. I don't like the word regrets. I'm so hard-pressed to say I have regrets because I feel as if we make decisions with the information that we have at the time we're making the decision. So if we are growing, the decisions we make at 16, at 26, at 36 can't possibly be the same kind of decisions we might make at 46, 56, 66, because we just keep on layering more years of experience, more years of wisdom. So what we think when we were younger, well, sometimes that's just misguided, or we're misinformed because we don't have all of the information. And so then I feel like, how can we really regret anything? I feel like there are some things I may have done differently if I had the information I have now, and that's kind of cyclical. Because if I had the information I had now, I would or wouldn't have been making those decisions. And all of those things that I've done prior, all of those things in the rearview mirror make me who I am today. So I think for me, I don't have regrets. But for me, maybe the word regret can be reserved for something that has completely altered one's life in the negative, like we did something that sent us to prison, or we did something that caused irrevocable harm to another person. Maybe I feel the word regret is such a heavy word, it can only be used for large circumstances. Because again, I, as a common, ordinary person, doesn't feel like I have any regrets, but I feel like I have learned a lot from my past. And a lot of the things that I've learned, I can infuse into my present life and change trajectories for myself, whether they be actual trajectory of things I'm physically doing, or whether it's a change of idea in my head, an emotion, a new thought process that I want to take on, or practice. You can't change without practice. I'm always referring to that Michelle Obama quote, you have to practice who you want to be. 8 words that the first time I heard her say that stuck with me. But in full disclosure, sometimes I don't want to practice, right? Sometimes I just want to be a person who's sometimes practicing, because practicing can be exhausting. But she's right. You have to practice who you want to be. You just can't be it. You know, there's a whole manifesting school of thought that tells us that we have to wake up every morning and behave as if we are already what we want or who we want to be. To behave as if we already have what we want, surrounding ourselves with the aura and the actual feeling of being and having. So if you want to be a film star, that school of manifestation will tell you to wake up in the morning, put on a pair of sunglasses, and strut out of your house with your nails done or in a fancy outfit, or conduct yourself in the store while you're ordering your coffee with an air of superiority, if you will. And the more that you do that, the more that you practice, the more you will be attracting what you need to attract. Now, of course, I'm being dramatically descriptive. I'm not really suggesting that all film stars have an air of superiority, but you get the drift of what I'm saying. Dress the part, be the part, drive the part. And I think that if you're lucky enough to have more in your rearview mirror, the more we can use those experiences to inform what we are manifesting, what we are dreaming about, and what we are creating in this present time. So the rearview mirror can be helpful. So what about it is problematic? Well, I'm going to tell you this. In my experience, the more time we have in our rearview mirror, the more we long for that time back, and the more we romanticize the time that's behind us. Everything behind us really does have an aura of joy filled with nostalgia around it. We do it in our own personal lives. We do it as a family. We do it in our group of friends. We do it as a community. We do it as a nation. We're always looking in the rearview mirror. And the more we look in the rearview mirror, the more opportunity we have to crash. And then once we've crashed, it's going to take us a while to get out of that scene. It's going to take us a while to extricate ourselves from that. So much easier for us to just kind of live in that rearview mirror. Listen, nostalgia and a quick trip back in our mind to back in the day, or back in the good old days, as we used to call it back in the day, the glory days, if you will. It's so much easier for us to revel in the days gone by and to think that everything there was so much better than it is today. Of course, we're looking at it through the eyes of the people we were when we lived in rearview mirror land. How many of us romanticize our childhood and remember those times as absolute pinnacles of joy and wonder? And in many ways, they were. If you had a pretty decent upbringing, and I say pretty decent because most of us, I think, had pretty decent upbringings. I don't really know anyone who, when put to the test of really taking a close look, categorized their childhood and their upbringing and their opportunity and their family life as being absolutely idyllic. And if that's the case, that's really wonderful. But most people that I tend to talk to tell a different tale of emotional dysfunction, financial hardships. You know, for me, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. I'm a boomer. My parents were from the greatest generation, Depression, World War II. My mom was first generation born here, and her home life was very different than ours. And so our home life was infused with the way my parents had been raised. You know, there's a lot of social mores then that were very different than what we have today. One's own problems or issues, one's own identities weren't easily talked about. There wasn't a lot of focus on mental health. So I think without malice, there was a lot of emotional neglect. But for all intents and purposes, we had pretty decent upbringings. Most of us surely felt loved. We had homes, food, clothes, nice schools, good friends, and fun adventures as kids. But we had no idea what was going on in the adult world. We were just experiencing life from the child world. We had no idea that many of the adult figures in our lives, aunts, uncles, neighbors, were struggling with many issues: alcoholism, addiction, problems in marriages, work-related issues, financial problems, not being able to make ends meet. We had no idea. So when we look back and say that things will never be the same again, I think what we're really referring to is that exact thought, but with a twist. Things will never be the same again, because in those days we were living in an innocence. We had no real idea what was happening in the outside world. All we knew is what we were existing in. It's not that things were better. I think it's that we just didn't know any better. So I'm going to take myself for an example. All I knew growing up is that we had a home, food, and lots of family around us. We went to my Uncle Rocco's all the time. My Uncle Rocco was a bachelor. The term in those days was bachelor, and he lived at what we referred to as the old homestead, which was the home that my mom and her parents and her siblings purchased when my mom was pretty young. Originally, they had lived in a rental by the side of a river with no hot water and no washing machine. My grandmother used to wash her clothes in the river outside of the house. It was a cold water rental, and eventually, when the kids got old enough to get jobs, the entire family put money into a community pot, and then they had the ability to buy a nicer home in a nicer neighborhood. And that is the old homestead. But it had 2 bedrooms. And it's so funny because growing up, I thought that house was so big, but it wasn't. It had a living room and a little dining area and kind of a kitchenette, a little bit of a gallery type kitchen. And then the upstairs where there were 2 bedrooms. And that never dawned on me as a child. Where did everybody sleep when they lived there? My mom had an older sister, so she was out of the house. She married young. But there was my mom, and she had 5 brothers and my grandparents. And when they bought the house, the war was just starting, World War II. And little by little, the brothers were going off to the war. But where did they all sleep when they came home? There was only 2 bedrooms, and I never questioned that. Once I asked that question to my mom when I was older, and I think she just said, well, who was in the bed, who was on the couch, who was on the floor? It just never crossed my mind that they bought a new home, but there were still struggles in it. In my rear view mirror mind, that house was perfect. So here's some more rear view mirror memories coming up in my little tale today. We used to go to the old homestead a lot. My uncle was an avid gardener, and we would always have fresh fruits and fresh vegetables from that garden, and we would climb the mulberry tree and eat mulberries when the season came in the early summer. And Rocco always had a candy dish filled with treats for us. And when there were treats in there that we really didn't like, he would take us to the candy store up the hill and pay for us to get as much penny candy as we wanted. And we loved to color. He always had coloring books and 64 crayons. We didn't have 64 crayons in the Cirillo house. We only had the boxes with the 8 or the 16. But that was my existence. And my uncles and aunts came over often, and my cousins and I would put on shows. You'd make the curtain over the doorway, and we would use that for our backstage, and then we would burst through the curtain and perform. And I remember we walked to school. My mom was home. Not many moms worked in those days, however. We had 2 moms on our street who were nurses. But I found out in later years they worked at night. I had no idea that they worked at night because everybody was home in the day. And we would walk to school in the morning and walk home at lunch. And then my mom would give us lunch, and we would walk back to school and then walk back home. And then all the kids would come over to play. And then we would wear play clothes. We would ride our bikes or throw super balls against the wall of the house. And we would make up extensive stories and act them out in my garage. And in the summer, we would do that all day. And we had a sprinkler, one that went back and forth. But when I was 8, my parents joined a little swimming club. It was called the American Italian Civic Club, still in existence. It was actually a man's club with lovely grounds that was originally a Girl Scout camp. And it had a swimming pool. And the backstory is that the men's club purchased the grounds so that the women and children would be occupied while the guys went to the clubhouse and played cards, etc. But no matter, we could picnic there, and we used to do that every day in the summer. And that was pretty much my life. I took piano lessons. I loved to perform in theater. I loved school. I was such a little 60s schoolgirl. I loved to go to school with my books in this little red elastic ribbon that would connect them all as I walked. I loved to study. Of course, my brother, not so much. He didn't like school. He thought it was a social gathering. We were both scouts. I was a Brownie and a Girl Scout. He was a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout. I quit Girl Scouts early on because I turned to music. When I think back, I can remember the wood panel walls in our living room and the TV with no remote, a couple of channels, my bedroom with twin beds. My mom liked the whole twin bed vibe. My extensive collection of stuffed animals and little kittles and Barbies, and those are my childhood memories. See, that's what I see. And I bet you see similar. So why have I taken the time to stop for a solid rear view mirror visit? Because now, as an adult, I can integrate what was really happening in that house. And I'm going to broad stroke it today, just for the listen. We had a lot of dysfunction in our home. It wasn't a very peaceful place. The family dynamic was difficult. Even though as a family, we were a cohesive unit. My parents did a lot of civic activities, and we were all very involved in our community and church. But there was still a lot of crazy in the house. And I think if most people my age, coming from the same economic bracket, having parents from that similar pool of the greatest generation, if we were to be honest, we probably have the same story. Parents doing the best they could, but with a myriad of other challenges surrounding them. But you see, I'm looking at it now from an adult integrated point of view. And if I just go back and see it as a child, it was so innocent and blissful. And so when we sit around in that space after having gone backward through the rearview mirror, if we don't catch ourselves, we say things like, it was so much better. But was it? I say again, was it any better? Or is it just that we didn't know any better? And the trap is that everybody thinks that their childhood is better than the present. Carly Simon hits it right on the head when she sings, "These are the good old days." When we look back, we tend to only see the fun, only see the good, and it feels nostalgic and warm and wonderful. Listen, I could poetically wax about my 20s for the next 3 hours because when I look back, they seem so wonderful. I think it was because it was the last time I just had unbridled fun with no real responsibility, any responsibility with any consequence. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with a quick visit back to that. I kind of thought then I was just going to get married and probably grow up quickly. We tend to negate the difficulties of the past when we look back in the rear view. It's like if you were stuck in a traffic jam for a while. You're angry and anxious about the traffic jam the whole time you're in it. But once you're out of it and you look in the rear view and see what you left behind, somehow it doesn't feel that bad anymore. Even in broader terms of our world, our nation, we forget when things weren't so easily cured, when medicine hadn't made breakthroughs, when operations and rehab took longer. I remember the first time a friend of mine said they had a hip replacement and came home on the same day. I thought they were lying, but we're there now. We forget the scandals, the political crazy, the times of inflation, recession, the gas crisis of the 70s. Housing crashes, stock market crashes, yet we still contend that everything before was better than today. It's rear view mirror stuff. And the farther we get away from it, I think in its smallness, it appears prettier. And somehow it causes a yearning. In many ways, we're afraid of the windshield. It's so big. And there's so many things to see. And there's a little trepidation and fear of what lies up ahead. Are we going to be able to handle what lies up ahead? Sometimes I'm sitting in the car and I'll say to a passenger, "Oh, we're making such great time. I don't want to jinx it. I hope we don't get into a traffic jam." Lots of trepidation going on there. Is the traffic jam coming? And what are we going to do when we get to it? How long is it going to take us to get through? It was so much better on the drive here. It was so smooth and sunny as opposed to now and what's up ahead. Sometimes I think that stops us, the fear of what's up ahead. Sometimes it also makes us weary, thinking that the journey's too long. We think we might have to stop and get some rest somewhere, eat something before we move on ahead. And I think that those pauses, while they might be helpful in that moment, can sometimes serve to take us off our course for more than the required time. We got to rest, reflect, and move onward. You see, the windshield is really all we've got if we want to keep moving. And as exhausting as it can be sometimes, the windshield is where it's at. So now we know what's behind us and have turned on our GPS for what's ahead. Some practical tips for embracing the windshield and giving a wink to the rearview mirror. Some solid Cris-losophy is up ahead next time. I'm happy you're here with me at the Wish House. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your comments. I'd love to have your feedback and hear your story. Got something you want to get some Cris-losophy on? Let me know in the comments. I'm Chris Spinner, and I'll see you next time.